Go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Jackie Metcalf, and I'm the founder and executive director of Texas Health and Environment Alliance. Thank you. First, I want to give a shout out and a thank you to all of our volunteers who helped with community outreach leading up to this meeting, and all of the volunteers tonight who are making sure that this meeting goes seamlessly for our team. Next, I'd like to take a moment to ask if there are any representatives from elected officials' offices here with us tonight. All right, Mr. Lawrence Bell in the back with Commissioner Ramsey's office. Would you like to make a statement?
No.
You're good. All right. Thanks, Lawrence. Thank you for being here. Well, I really appreciate your participation, and I'm a little surprised to see that there are not any other elected officials' offices here. We did hold a briefing last week for elected officials, and we had, I believe, 12 different elected officials' offices represented at that meeting, and we'd hoped that they would have been here tonight. Is there anyone from a government agency that would like to introduce themselves? Okay, all right. Okay, before I go any further, I want to talk to you about this table here. So, we asked for the study, Texas Health and Environment Alliance, we asked for the study that we're going to be discussing tonight. And in the year that we worked with the State Health Department and communicated about this cancer assessment, they told us that they would do outreach with us. They told us that they would host community meetings with us. We invited them to this meeting, and we invited them to the identical meeting that we will have on the 21st in Crosby. And they declined to join us at either of the meetings. So they got their own special table here tonight because it's a little upsetting that they chose to decline to participate in the meetings. All right, so a little bit about who we are as an organization and what we do. I know we have a lot of folks in the room tonight who have engaged with us over the years, but there are also a variety of new folks. So we really, at the end of the day, our organization strives to protect public health and the environment from the harmful effects of toxic waste. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. Tomorrow is our 10th birthday. Woohoo! So we have been working in the communities here for about 14 years, but our 10th birthday is tomorrow, and we're funded by individuals and foundations. We are not the government, we are not lawyers, and we are not a for-profit entity. I know there's different, buzz about who's who, and we're none of those last few things. We use strategic science, grassroots community organizing, regulatory expertise, environmental health literacy, and media exposure to try to bring about change and help communities impact change in their communities. Purely founded out of necessity. I was in environmental management as an environmental geology student at U of H Clear Lake, and was learning the principles that if your environment is making you sick, you're not going to be alone. So my mom and I started going door to door talking to our neighbors, something very odd that you typically don't do. You typically don't see your neighbor and say, hey, I just got home from chemo, I have this specific type of cancer I'm being treated for. Most people just don't do that. And talking with our neighbors, we saw that we felt we lived in an area with disproportionate rates of cancer, and at that time, we began investigating the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site because it was, and still in part is, sitting in the river, and at that time, openly exposed. None of us knew about it. Many of us recreated right on top of it or right beside it. So if I could, with a show of hands, see how many of you have or have a loved one that has been impacted by cancer. Thank you. I talked to some of you before the meeting about how you heard about this meeting, and I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your day and out of your week to be here. But we want to make sure that we're reaching folks as effectively as we can. How many of you are here because you saw the yard signs? Cool. How many of you are here because you received a postcard in the mail? All right. And how many of you heard about this through some form of media, social media, emails? All right, wonderful. Okay, thank you all. All right, let's get into this study and the meat and potatoes of what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about Texas Department of State Health Services 2025 Cancer Assessment for East Harris County, which designates over 250 square mile of Harris County a cancer cluster. So simply, what is a cancer cluster? It is a greater than expected number of cases of cancer in a group of people in a geographic area in a specific time frame. We're going to dive into all of those factors tonight. It's important to understand that the way that this data is retrieved. So the Texas Cancer Registry is where the state got the data for this assessment. And people are entered into the registry at the place that they live when they are diagnosed with cancer. So if you have a loved one that moved away and was diagnosed once they moved away, then they would not have been accounted for possibly in the study, because it's only looking at specific cancers in a specific area and a specific time period. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So this area here, as you can see on the map, that looks like a side profile. Here's the bow tie, here's the nose. This is the study area. And we requested that Texas Department of State Health Services conduct a cancer assessment for this area. That was chosen because the state identified this area as a potential area of concern back in 2015 when we did a previous study with them. We'll talk about that later. It's about a 250 square mile area, and it encompasses 65 census tracts. One of the main efforts that we do, and what I did when I lived here in Highlands, what my family did, was advocate for the full remediation of the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site. So, when back in 2015, the San Jacinto River Coalition, when we did the study, we said we feel that the waste pits have impacted our community's health. And the state made the decision to study this large of an area. The caveat was all of these different little zones must be broken up. If you're going to go all the way up to Lake Houston to look at something down here in the San Jacinto River and I-10, you better break it down into smaller tracts for us. So I don't want you to think that we somehow dreamt up this big area. We were going on as an addition to the last study in terms of the study area. We asked for 22 types of cancer to be studied in people of all ages, and 7 types of cancer to be studied for children. We asked for those specific cancer types because we collect health surveys, and we asked for the types of cancer that area residents were telling us they were concerned about. So on the back of your agenda, the types of cancer studied in people of all ages are on the back of your agenda. That table there is from the state's study. So if you have a cancer or are concerned about a cancer that's not on there, I strongly encourage you to fill out one of our health surveys so that we know that there's a concern for a specific type of cancer. Because if the state's not pulling that data from the database, we won't have information on it, and we can't do it without you telling us you're concerned. So, Department of State Health Services, when they produced this 2025 assessment, we had a big surprise. And that big surprise was this time they didn't break out the study area by census tract. They only gave us the information across the entire 65 census tract or 250 square mile area. So they designated this entire area a cancer cluster for leukemia, lymphoma, cervical, lung, and bronchus cancers. The study did not intend to determine the cause of the cancers. We knew that going in. We knew going into this that the state, it's simply not what this type of study does. But it should certainly tell us localized information and what the next steps are if something is found. So now that we have this massive area of Harris County that has been designated a cancer cluster, what do we know about the area? What are the commonalities, right? Because if I'm sick and my neighbor's sick, then what do we share? The air, the land, the water. Maybe we both eat seafood, grew up on the beach, on the river, or boating, ATV, you know, all of the things many of us have done on the San Jacinto River. So this area is home to over 330,000 people. When we did a land use assessment several years back, the residential land use of the area was projected to double by 2040. It is one of the fastest growing parts of Harris County. And a lot of the region gets their drinking water from this area. Not only that, but we know that there's 5 Superfund sites in this area. There's the French Limited Superfund site up here, the Sykes Disposal Superfund site. We have the Highlands Acid Pits, the first Superfund site in Texas. Highlands is home to that. We have the San Jacinto River Waste Pit Superfund site, and then we have the Patrick's Vido Superfund site. The blue circles on here indicate water intake locations, many of which are for the city of Houston and other large municipalities. I'm not saying that those water sources are contaminated, but it's concerning that the state specifically noted that they were looking at cancer types in the San Jacinto River floodplain. These sites, these areas, we all know have repeatedly been inundated from that river flooding. Whether we got the rain here or the rain came from up north, from the northwest side, or whether the flood came from a storm surge. My family left the area in 2013, but there are some very notable storms that we experienced while we lived here. Sorry, I certainly don't want to forget the industrial pollution as well. So as an organization, we focus on the historical, but we know that there are major industrial polluters in the area. We know that the benzene emissions and the benzene in our air in recent years or the last decade has increased substantially. I remember, when we left here in 2013, there were a lot of barges on the river, but it's nothing like it is today. It has gotten completely out of control with barges on the river. It was a little scary back then to be boating on the river, but today, now, that river has been taken from us. It's scary to be out there around I-10 on a boat. It's not, no. Not to mention the explosions. Let me go back because, this study goes all the way up to the railroad trestle at Lake Houston, all the way down to LaPorte, all the way into North Shore and out to Mont Belvieu. There have been multiple explosions, whether it's in Crosby or in Channelview, further south. Our fish consumption advisory for dioxins and PCBs, which was first issued in 1990, That doesn't mean that's when the problem started. That's when they started testing our seafood. And that's when the first fish consumption advisory was issued, and is still very much in effect today. We have some of these maps on our sign-in tables if you would like one. And I encourage you, any of the information that we have, please give to people, your neighbors, your colleagues, your loved ones. If you know someone who fishes or crabs on any of these tributaries, I encourage you to please share this information with them. So I mentioned a 2015 study. So I want to talk about this because the state of Texas did not include an important section in this recent study, and that is next steps. When we had the study, got the study produced in 2015, it had next steps. This new report, there's nothing. It just ended. It doesn't tell us what's next. It doesn't tell us, based on the findings of a cancer cluster across 250 square miles of Harris County, what steps can be taken. So, in the 2015 study, it looked at cancer rates from 1995 to 2012. And when they looked at the whole area, which again is that same area, it had fewer census tracts back then, but the same geographic area. The area as a whole had 2 types of childhood cancer at abnormally high rates, and only 2 types of cancer in people of all ages at abnormal rates. But when they broke it down on this census tract level, which are these smaller geographic zones, and the numbers here in these zones represent census tracts, to give you your bearings, this black dot is the waste pits, 25, 29 is Highlands. That's where we are right now. And this bend here follows the river. So I think we all kind of know the hook here and the bend right here on the river. And this line is I-10. So when they broke it out per census tract in that 2015 study, 5 out of 8 childhood cancers were abnormally high. Brain cancer, leukemia, glioma, melanoma, and retinoblastoma, all abnormally high in at least 1 census tract. The census tracts in red indicate at least 1 type of cancer at an abnormal rate. Per census tract for people of all ages, 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 types studied. Brain cancer, leukemia, female breast cancer, male breast cancer, cervical cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, lymphoma, and myeloma. My God, it's not like a bunch of us are just genetically dysfunctional and decided we wanted a life on the river. That's not the way it works. And I think a lot of you in here will know Love Canal and the first real tragedy like this in the United States. And Lois Gibbs, who was behind that movement there, will say that. It's not like a group of genetically dysfunctional people moved to the same area. We didn't. So, what we know now is that we have a giant cancer cluster. We have a greater than expected number of cancer cases in a group of people over a specific time period in this massively defined geographic area. The study that the state produced was essentially governed by the Center for Disease Control's policies and procedures, and how they should conduct these studies, how they should report these studies, the methodology, all of those details. And despite the guidelines, the state has some discretion. And some of that is whether or not they report the findings across the entire area, or if they also give the smaller geographic zones data. And the 2022 CDC guidelines, or Center for Disease Control guidelines, that the state uses, it references, or in reference in their study, it states, it is possible to create or obscure a cluster inadvertently. Sorry, let me just start over. I'm not reading that well tonight. Okay, so it is possible to create or obscure a cluster inadvertently by modifying the area of interest. So we asked for this study in February of 2024. The state told us it would be published in late summer. So summer 2024, I start emailing. Hey, where's the study? What's the status? And we had worked well together. We had worked closely together during the time period from when we made the request. And we have made the request before, and they just flat out told us, no, we're not doing it. So they did it this time. We worked well together, and then summer got a little interesting because we didn't have the study. So by late summer, they said it's done, but it's in executive review. So by, I don't know, maybe October or November, somewhere in the fall, once the seasons changed, and literally my team and I are looking at the calendar going, oh, summer is officially done. I think it's actually my birthday in September, where it's like, it's officially no longer summer. Where is it? What's going on? And they said, it's still an executive review, it's done, nothing should change though, it's just sitting in review. So we started to question, will we ever get this study? And then all of a sudden in February of this year, the study is posted online. And I'm notified that the study is out. And we started scrambling, and so this tonight is the first of a series of public meetings that we're going to be holding to inform people about this study, because we kind of started feeling like we might not ever actually get it. But why did it sit in executive review for 7 months? And then why did it come out to only tell us that this massive area, only give us the data for the massive area? It's difficult to figure out where to go from here. How can we help our communities across a 250 square mile area? The number escapes my mind, but I think there were over 27 or 30 different elected officials. Does anyone on my team know off the top of mind? A long spreadsheet full. We went and found all of the elected officials that are responsible for this massive area to invite them to come and hear a briefing for us, because the state wasn't reaching out to them. Our local government didn't hear anything from the state on this matter. Our state officials didn't as well. Our representatives who are in session right now, they didn't know. So we reached out to their offices, and it was somewhere around 27, 30, or even maybe more different offices for this area. So how can we work with officials to help bring in services or help do what the community wants done over this big of an area? And how do we know if there is a localized issue impacting our health? We can't. It's diluted in this. And people who live and people who represent areas that are not living in a community of abnormally high cancer rates deserve to know that also. So we really hate to bring a problem to the community without having a solution or a hard direction. But even the community members we talk to, it's where do we go from here? How do we do anything about this? So we put some posters in the back with just some ideas, and we're not at THEA necessarily the people who can facilitate all of those things, but we will certainly bring the people to the table who can. And some things that people want to see around here are access to healthcare. You know, not having to drive if you're, north of here, having to drive to Baytown or somewhere to get, adequate healthcare. Early detection screenings for cancer. More air monitors. A lot of people are really concerned about the air quality. Cleaning up the old toxic waste sites. Information on drinking water quality. Those are some of the things we're hearing. But we have to get this localized data. So, information, informing others. Please, I encourage you to talk to your neighbors. We have another meeting later this month on April 21st. Spanish translation will be available at that meeting. And I encourage you to please tell others. Engage your elected officials. Let them know, because they've heard from us. I guarantee it. They've heard from us. Let them know you're concerned about this. And also, please consider signing a letter or writing your own and sending it to Texas Department of State Health Services. The letter we have here tonight is to Texas Department of State Health Services and the EPA. Because for us, for the thousands of area residents that we've been working with for over a decade, people want the waste pits out of there. It is not a safe spot for dioxin waste. It was put there pre-EPA, made its way into the river and beyond, and it has to go. It needs to be in a controlled and safe environment. And we'll never be able to stand here and definitively say, I won't anyways be able to do that, and say, yes, it caused this. But we know, we've swam in it, we've played in yards with it, we've drank it in our well water, we've ate fish with it, and we know that it's a carcinogen. We know it causes disease. And so our letter is to the commissioner of our state health department and to the EPA. They have the authority to make decisions here that are health protective for the community. So I'm going to leave this slide here just for a second. This information is on our website, on our social media. I can't recall if I put it on your agenda, which if I did not, that was definitely a big oversight. I apologize. But please share the information for people who could come. We will also put the recording of this meeting on our website. It's being streamed live right now on our Facebook. So we encourage you to use your voice to let your elected officials know your story, your concerns, because we have to figure out what we want to advocate for. What do we care about? And how do we do anything about this? When I set out to found Thea, it was because I didn't want a family to go through what mine had. My parents bought their dream home. A little fork of the San Jacinto River went up the back. When the river flooded, the property flooded up the back. We never thought twice about it. We still ate the eggs from the chickens that played in that soil that got flooded. We never thought about it. So where do we go from here? Now I want to open it up to hear from you, your questions, your concerns. We'll have Amy running a microphone around. If you would like to speak, if you would raise your hand. And then when you have the mic, if you would give your name and where you're from. Yes, sir. Philip.
Philip Glass. I live in Channelview. I'm an active member of CHIC, Channelview Health and Improvement Coalition. I encourage you to come to our meetings. Carolyn Stone is here, who's the founder of it, and we do a lot in our community. In your study with the State Department of Health and the EPA and all the associated organizations, has there been any study at all how to resolve cancer other than chemotherapy? That's the question.
No. One thing that we're very big on is a holistic approach and detoxing. If you feel that you've been impacted by toxins, most of us here on Earth carry some toxic burden, but I believe it's much heavier over here. So that's something, that my family we really leaned into heavily and made a dramatic difference in our health. There's a place in League City called Natural Living, and it's a co-op, and the woman there is incredibly knowledgeable about detoxing and holistic medicine. She's not a medical doctor, but she's very good and has had a lot of training. And so if someone's interested in that type of stuff, she's someone I would recommend you contact. But no, otherwise no. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Brenda Farmer. I'm born and raised in Highlands. I know when you first started out with we came to several meetings, and we had talked about the cancer clusters and a lot of the residents in the community, and the EPA and the CDC denied it completely. They didn't want to have anything to do with any studies. Why now, when McGinnis and the paper mill, who had dumped in the acid pits on the river, they've been released now as of last year, completely released of any more liability? Why now are they saying yes?
No. So independent processes. So yeah, it's okay. So there's a few different processes going on. So in the early years, many of us were basically shouting at the EPA, study our health. We're sick, this isn't normal, study our health. And the EPA would not.
Right.
They had earlier defaulted to a federal agency called the ATSDR, who interviewed the responsible parties and one or two other people that had a very vested interest in this site for their assessment. They would not acknowledge groundwater as a route of exposure.
Right.
There were many flaws with that.
Yes.
So the EPA defaulted to that and said, if your health is going to be studied, it needs to be your state health department. So it took us a couple years of screaming at the state health department at the EPA's meetings, and finally they did, and that's this study. So that study ended in 2012, the time frame of the data. So we knew that we wanted updated information, and we asked the state several years ago to do an updated study, and they said no. Then this time they agreed. The intent or indifference, I'm not sure. But aside from that was the tort litigation that community members were signed up in. There were about 600 plaintiffs. And that is handled completely differently and separately than these studies are, and then that the Superfund process is for the actual cleanup and remediation of the sites. So most of the plaintiffs in that case settled.
Yes.
So there were
We basically had no choice.
You know, sadly, I've never heard from a community across the nation that has been impacted by pollution that has got a fair seat at the table in their litigation. So, however, the EPA is still holding those parties accountable for the cleanup of that site.
Which is great.
But Harris County also, in the different precincts up north, they settled with McGinnis,
Yes,
and they got a large settlement.
yes,
What about
29.8 or 29.2 million. Yeah.
northern precincts? What about this precinct? Like, I mean, where we're affected, we're on ground zero. Our wells were literally right in the pit. So, you know,
Yeah.
where do we go from there as far as legality and their liability in it?
I really appreciate you bringing this up. So I believe it was almost 10 years ago by now, Harris County and the state of Texas sued the parties responsible for the waste pits. And they settled for about I think it was 29.2, but 29 point something million dollars. And about 10 million of that went to the state of Texas's general revenue.
Yep.
And about 10 million of that went to a fund in Harris County, which for a long time was Commissioner Mormon, then it was Adrian Garcia, and now it's split. The district is split at I-10. You've got Garcia to the south and Ramsey to the north. Me and some others lobbied at the state of Texas to get that $10 million brought back to that local fund. It was actually the first time in state history that funds from the state's general revenue went back to the local government. We were successful. It came back, and it went back into that fund. So the county essentially had $20 million. The other around 9 something went to pay the outside counsel, the attorneys that it cost the county and the state to fight the litigation. So that money went into a fund. There were a few things that it was used for in the early years. It had to be, the legislature that was passed at the state and in Commissioner's Court was very specific to be used within a specific radius of the waste pits, and it had to be something for parks, recreation, safety. It had very specific requirements. We did receive a few grants out of that. We have not in several years, in a long time. But Lawrence, if you would please let Commissioner Ramsey know that an area resident from Highlands is wondering about the settlement funds from when Harris County litigated over the waste pits. And it all took place when it was, Commissioner, I just said his name, Mormon. When Commissioner Mormon presided over this whole area, it went into a specific fund to be used in this area. If you need any other details, we can connect later. But yeah, please let him know that.
I think specifically the portion that went to the Highlands area was specified for new water and sewer lines.
Oh,
If I'm not
interesting.
mistaken, I remember following it closely because I was wondering how come so much of the money was funded to the north of us. I think Precinct 5 got a huge amount, and it was specified for Parks and Recreation there. So
Yes, okay. Yeah, I know that there was certain allocations once the funds came that were, I have heard different people over the years having concerns over how funds have been allocated.
Yeah.
Before Commissioner Ramsey was in office, Commissioner Garcia had told me, not him, his staff had told me, we'll put an accounting of it online. Because I told him, I said, people are really concerned about where this money has gone. Or is it still there? And his staffer had said, we'll put an accounting of it online. Oh yeah, it's gone to local projects, there's still some there, we'll put an accounting of it online. That's never happened. So hopefully Commissioner Ramsey, possibly Garcia, could bring some accountability. I'll be at Commissioner's Court talking with them this Thursday. Yes, Carolyn.
I just want to add to that. Hi, I'm Carolyn Stone, founder of Channelview Health and Improvement Coalition, or y'all may know it as CHIC. But in responding to what Jackie just said, we also had an occasion where we saw go through Commissioner's Court an amount of money that was to come from the Waste Pit Fund. But it was to be used at the Armand Bayou Nature Center. We got a little upset over that and asked about it. So in the end, what they had told us, oh, it was an accounting mistake, it was miscoded. That money was not, it actually came out of this other fund. At that same time, Commissioner Garcia's office, personnel, also told us that they would give us an accounting of where all the money had went. It has been, I believe, 2 years now. We have asked several times. and we have never received an accounting, so it's a pattern.
Yeah, well, Marcia's office is
Send it
that
to
way.
Carson.
So, do we need to do a FOIA and request that information?
Oh, that's a great idea, Carolyn. So, yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, ways that we might be able to get that information. Also, while I have Carolyn top of mind and David also here, if you have not heard about the Fumed podcast by Public Health Watch, I strongly encourage you to listen to it. FUMED. That is on any podcast place where you hear your podcasts. It's about the Channelview community, the San Jacinto River, and area concerns. Now go to the gentleman in the back.
They are flyers on the...
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. And there are flyers for Fumed as well as an item for Chick.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Bleacher. I live here in Highlands. First of all, I want to thank you and all the volunteers and all the different organizations for your time, your talent, and your attention to this very serious matter. And I'm glad to see at least one elected official represented. Senate representation, my elected official, so that's good. But I want to urge everybody, I want to remind everybody to not assume that somebody else will call, that somebody else will voice their concern. Because when we first moved here, just a little over a year ago, we had to stop at the train tracks coming into town on Main Street. And of course I had to find out who my elected official was going to be, right? And I reached out and I had talked to the HOA board. I put complaints on Nextdoor, Facebook, and people said, "Oh, you'll never get that fixed. That'll never get addressed. Forget it, buddy. I'm not a Yankee, but they called me that, But anyway, it did get fixed. Ramsey's office fixed it, to their credit. But I called, right? So I urged other people to call, and they just laughed at me. So you can get things done. At the same time, the way the political lines are drawn, you know how they're drawn. Precinct 2 is right down the road. So Precinct 3 can't help me with that. And Precinct 2, they're like the neighbors who laughed at me. They just laugh at you, So one person can make a difference, but it's going to be when that person's got a lot of friends. So please pick up the phone and call. So not really a question, just an affirmation for you.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. I appreciate that. He's right. Every voice matters. Absolutely. And I do want to point out that we do now have in attendance a representative from Commissioner Garcia's office. Thank you for being here. I see Lisa Gossett has the mic, and after that I'll go to Jean Hennigan.
Hello, my name is Lisa Gossett, and I am here in my role as a board member of THEA. I also teach in the environmental management program at the University of Houston Clear Lake, so I do have some background as an environmental professional. In my role as a board member, I want to point out that THEA does not give medical advice. So in response to that first question, that's not what we're here for. Although certainly lifestyle and many other things can contribute to hopefully minimizing the chances of getting cancer. I want to bring in some clarifications from what I've heard here in different ways legally some of these issues can get approached. One that you've heard about is people can bring private tort-type lawsuits for their injuries to ask somebody, hey, we think you injured us. We think you should pay us. We think you should pay our medical bills. And that's one approach that can be taken. It's very difficult to prove cause and effect in those situations. So yes, it's very often difficult to hold the people liable who probably caused or at least contributed to the health problems. Another approach is to say, okay, there's contamination in the area, or there are sources of pollution in the area. how can we minimize those risks? And who can help us address that? And right now, it is the regulatory agencies. I know regulation often has a bad name, but it's often there to protect health because of problems that have occurred in the past where people, like Love Canal, have been harmed. THEA's goal is really to work with the agencies who can require the changes and get that waste removed or contained. And we've been successful. There has been many, many truckloads of waste removed from the San Jacinto River waste pit sites, and plans are underway to address the remaining contamination. It is a slow and difficult process. Another is for a governmental entity to take enforcement action, and that is what Harris County did. So that $29 million was funds that Harris County got in an enforcement action, which is again different from individuals who've been hurt. And so it had to go for more public causes and not to specific individuals. I also want to point out how difficult it is to prove cause and effect with cancer. It's usually caused by multiple factors, some lifestyle, some exposure. It's a whole range of contributions. And to point to any one effect, say it caused this cancer, apart from asbestos causing asbestosis, it's incredibly difficult. Because even if you double the rates of breast cancer, are people going to get breast cancer without that exposure in the community? You'll still have that incidence. So again, that cause and effect becomes very difficult. I think here, what we can ask for is more study and more information. I think it's critical that we get more information. I think we have some idea who might be or what might be contributors to the cancer cluster that we see. One is the waste pits. Now, can we definitively prove the waste pits caused specific cancers? Hard to do. Another that you've heard is it could be air contamination around here. I encourage you to listen to the podcast Fumed if you have not. It really goes into some of the explosions and accidents that have occurred and how those create exposures to different communities. And are those contributors? Probably. Public Health Watch has also documented high benzene levels not far from here. Benzene is a known contributor. So all of those can be factors that come into play. And I think we need more research. I think in terms of what can you do, you just heard eloquently, hey, you call your representatives, that can bring change. And one of the things we specifically want here is some of that data split out by census tract. In the 2015 study, the census tracts where there were significantly high levels of cancer noted, there was a chart that noted the census tract number and the type of cancer. We were initially told as THEA that that type of information would be made available in this study, and it was not. We've also been told the analysis has been done. So, I think enough pressure on our state entities and representatives and agencies should hopefully lead to that coming out at some point. I also want to point out a quote that was said earlier, that it is also possible to create or obscure a cluster inadvertently by modifying the area of concern. And that came straight from CDC's data. I will also add, from what I know, it is possible to create or obscure a cluster intentionally by modifying an area of concern. I don't know what happened here because we don't have the information. And I'm a believer that information is power, and one of the things that we have the ability to do is ask for more information. And with that, I probably took too long.
No problem. Thank you, Lisa. Amy, will you run the mic over here to Jean Hennigan? Jean, will you raise your hand, please?
Thank you. I'm Gene Hennigan. I live in the Lynchburg area. Jackie, we had an awesome meeting when you announced this cluster. We had all kinds of news coverage for 48 hours. I hadn't heard a damn thing since. You know, Commissioner Ramsey said he was going to go to our representatives. You know, I'm just kind of wondering what's really happened. I mean, you know, in the news today, like you said, 48 hours and it's all over. It's not over for us. And I'm just wondering, did we really make any impact at all?
Well, the answer is yes. Commissioner Ramsey asked was support date Thursday.
Amy.
Hang on, Lawrence. I'll have Amy run you the mic.
Say something too.
We need to hear what he thinks.
Sorry about that. I was saying that Commissioner Ramsey has on the court agenda for this Thursday this issue of the cancer cluster in this area. So, and he has reached out to all to representatives, the state legislature.
Have we had any comments from them back?
I'm not aware of any comments back, but that's not to say they haven't been. But I encourage you to listen or even come to sign up to talk at Commissioner's Court on Thursday, because he's definitely going to bring it up, the issue up.
Okay, thank you. You know, Gene, it's a long game. And there's a massive disconnect by the people who live it and the people who make the decisions. I don't live here anymore, but it's still a part of me. You know, I'm going through things in doctors right now. I 100% believe because of where I lived. My dad, you know, the things my family has going on, we're not here, but it's still with us. And for the people who have the power to make the decisions, there's often a big disconnect, simply. But I do believe that the announcement of this study and these findings have already made a difference. Commissioner Ramsey is one of the most active elected officials I've ever worked with. And you know, at THEA, it's very important to us, especially as a nonprofit, to work with every political party, because to me, that really shouldn't matter. You know, this is about human lives. This is about our right to the American dream, to build a home, to live somewhere, to swim in a river, fish a river safely. Exactly. And that's been taken from so many people around here. And so, you know, unfortunately, politics is a part of it because that's where the decisions lie. And, you know, you called on EPA's new administrator, Zeldin. He hasn't been here. I haven't heard from him. I know he went to another Superfund site way north up in the U.S., but we haven't heard anything here. And I haven't actually heard anything from the EPA since we got this study. But I know they were briefed on it. The only entity that the state health department briefed was the EPA project managers for the Sanders Center River Waste Pit Superfund site.
Is there a name?
A name for?
EPA that we could call
Lee
daily and harass?
Lee Zeldin.
I mean, they get tired of listening to you and eventually they'll do something.
Yeah, I think that you should call, I'll get you the numbers. We had him on that last agenda, Gene, I remember we talked about it. Lee Zeldin, and then the guy, I think his name is Scott, it's escaping me, but the Region 6 administrator as well. The Region 6 administrator has a substantial amount of authority over the waste pits right now, and then as does Administrator Zeldin. Now, regarding the cancer assessment and wanting that census level data, I'm going to give you the mic next, Tori. The census level data. We're targeting the commissioner. She's an appointed position, but she is the top of Texas Department of State Health Services. So her information and Zeldin's information is on the letter that we have here. And yes, I know you're retired, and so yeah, please call, please write. Putting stuff in writing is always great because there's a trail of that. Amy, if you'll give her the mic, please. Okay, Scott Mason. All right, I knew there was a Scott in there. Thanks.
My name is Sharon Graves. I was born and raised right across the river from the Superfund site. We had water well, so our groundwater was totally contaminated. Probably 85 to 90% of the people that lived on the street and the street next door to me were diagnosed with some form of cancer in the past quite a few years. My question is, your map up there, is that pink a danger site? My question is, there's about 20,000 homes going in just north of Crosby. Has anybody notified up to 100,000, 150,000 people going to be moving into that area? Is there any kind of a notification? Is that map out there that says caution before you buy here? Think about it. Does anybody think about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you gave me goosebumps.
Because if not,
I'm with
this
you.
is going to continue.
I'm with you. So, legally, there is not a requirement for people up there or where you are to be notified. The requirement is only if you border the property. Right now, there's a state representative who has proposed legislature. Some people are going to hate this and some people are going to like it. I think you're going to like it. But the legislation is that people within, I think she should 5 miles, a 5-mile radius of a Superfund site should be notified of the site and provided information about the site so that they can make an informed decision. Now, that it has not passed, it's not, you know, as of this moment, going to be going into law, but it is something that was proposed in this session in response to her working with communities that have been impacted by Superfund sites and the concern of why didn't anybody tell me?
Exactly.
Lisa. Okay.
The question was raised whether this whole pink area is an area of concern. And I think it's just intuitive that some of these areas are going to be more contaminated than other areas within that. And some of these areas within it are going to have higher levels of cancer than other areas within it. That's why we need the census tract level data. Because as Jackie said earlier, if people are living in areas that don't have an elevated level of cancer within that pink area, that's useful information for them to know. And if you're living in an area that has way more than 3 times the expected rate of leukemia, you also need to know that. So again, information is power, and I think a lot of what we try to do as THEA is to get that information out, available, calculated. Believe it or not, the Texas Department of State Health Services does not just sit there calculating this cancer data that they collect. Best I can tell, it sits there until someone like us very specifically asks for the analysis. I think a lot of citizens think, oh, if there's a cancer cluster, they'll figure it out and they'll let me know. Again, you have to use your own voice and start asking your questions to get that information. Because if we hadn't aggressively pursued this as THEA, we wouldn't have the information we have tonight, which, while not good news, I think helps prepare people to know what information to ask for and to make some decisions in their lives.
I think that's a hard lesson that many of us have learned. If something's wrong, you're not necessarily going to get something in the mail, or someone's probably not going to knock on your door. And, you know, I once had this inherent belief that if something was wrong with the water flowing into my home that we were bathing in, cooking with, drinking, somebody would let us know. And we learned the hard way that's not always the case. One of the things that we did in preparation for this meeting to kind of test out is sending out postcards. And so we sent out 400 postcards. It costs 70 cents a postcard. If you don't calculate design time and that, but just for the postcard, once it's all designed and input, we sent out 400 postcards to see, can we reach people through this method? And it's something that is one of the items that will be discussed at Commissioner's Court also on Thursday as part of an initiative between another nonprofit in Harris County. I was the ambassador for Precinct 3 in that initiative, and the thing I wanted to do was send everybody within, depended on the population, but a 2 or 3, maybe even 5 mile radius of a Superfund site, a postcard. People should have this information. We firmly believe that. Yes.
Carolyn said a word that I don't know and then used seconded the foyer. I'm not sure what that is. So if you'll explain what that is and what that opportunity is. But on the letter here, it would be helpful if this included the information for the state representatives or whoever that is, that we're not just telling EPA, hey, come look at this and this is our founded basis of what we want you to look at, but also copying the state people on that.
I agree. And we can certainly send them as well to the state officials. Most of our letters we do copy to different agencies. We do usually put it on there. I don't think that we did though at all. So great point there, thank you. How many people, and I will address the FOIA, how many people in this room do not email? Okay, love you, love that. No problem, random, gotcha. We can follow up via email with the elected officials and their contact information. My team's already dug for it for the whole area, but there's a really great website. Just Google who represents me, and you put in your address, and it's going to tell you school district, all the different, anybody who has a decision-making power over your area. It's a really, really great function that I believe the state of Texas set up. Regarding the FOIA, so FOIA is Freedom of Information Act request. That's on the federal level though, so for the state, my understanding is we would do a Public Information Act request to try to get that information, which also we are certainly looking into doing for the state's information. We met with the epidemiologist who did this study, who's the director of the program that did this study. They have the data. They just told me that they don't produce it because it could create erroneous results. But the guidelines that they follow give them the discretion to produce it or not. And those guidelines also mention how those decisions could obscure the situation. So we need that data, and it would be in the state's best interest to provide it to us, but if we got it, we would be getting the raw numbers. What we have is a statistical analysis that the state did. But let's see, let me go to the back of the agenda. Quickly, I know there were a few other hands. So this chart here, and we made a mock-up. This chart is one that drafted. It's the exact information though from table 1 in the study, but we had to translate it into Spanish. So this table here though gives you the observed number of cancer in a specific area, which is the whole area, the expected, the standardized incident ratio, and the 95% confidence interval. Those last 2 columns, the farthest columns out, are computed. Those are numbers that are crunched by the epidemiologist in the state health department. So if you look here and you go line by line and you look at, which ones have the little asterisk, the little stars, which indicate that the state is considering them as significant. If you look at other ones and you see, all right, let's do bladder cancer, for example. They expected to see 300.1 cases in the study area. They saw 318. But it's not considered significant by the statistical computation. Now, one thing I thought was particularly interesting in the meeting I had with the epidemiologist was that she said, there are certain things we know that cause bladder cancer, like benzene, for example. That was literally what was said. So I'll just leave that there. And I also want to say, I'm incredibly appreciative that the agency did this study. We asked for it, they did it, they gave us almost everything we asked for, but they left a whole lot off the table. And if any resident asks for a study, the state is required to investigate and consider and discuss internally doing that study.
And still determine whether they want to give it to you or not. Isn't that what you just said?
A lot of decisions are made at the top, at their discretion. Yeah.
So they're holding out on us, bottom line.
Fully believe so. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Excuse me.
I mean, if you guys did the petition and we all signed it, can't you just send it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can absolutely do a petition. We chose to do a letter instead. Same kind of concept, but we chose to do a letter instead. We just had a few, we had several things to say. So petition's usually a little bit shorter. Yes, David.
That's a quick question. You were saying that y'all had a... Hi, I'm David Leffler with Public Health Watch. I just had a question. So you were saying that y'all had a briefing with a lot of the elected officials. Can you just go back over that real quick to say who was there, and was DSHS there too, or no?
No, so we had a private briefing that we hosted last week, and 12 different offices were represented, from the local county offices to local cities. There were numerous cities involved in this study area. State representatives, Congressman Babin's office was there, Congressman, I'm totally drawing blanks tonight, Crenshaw, his office was there. And so 12 of the offices responded and attended the meeting. I think we actually had like an RSVP of like 23 or 25, but a lot fewer showed. And so when we released this study, we heard from elected officials who were mad that we didn't notify them of this study. And I'm like, well, I didn't realize that I was responsible for that, because I'm not. The state agency should be. So, with those conversations, my team and I decided, you know what, this might be a little unconventional, but let's host a briefing that is just for the elected agencies, and let's host it ahead of the community meetings so they can be informed and they can show up, which, thank you to the two that did. They can be informed and show up and hear from their constituents. And it was a very productive meeting, I feel, but it really lands back on the same thing. Without that census tract level data, how do we know where to hone in? I mean, what's going on right now in Greater Fifth Ward with the cancer assessment, the cancer cluster there, one of their elected officials worked diligently to bring early detection screening to area residents. And it's wonderful what was set up. They have, a few census tracts in their study. What do you do with 65 census tracts? So it was the same, sentiment really that was shared by a lot of the folks there. I wouldn't be able to, rattle off the top of my head exactly who was there, or whose offices were represented there, but we could powwow later if you wanted. Yeah. Victoria in the back, yes.
And I'm just going to run to the front real quick so y'all can see me. So hi, I'm Victoria Matias. I am the community coordinator for THEA. And I just wanted to ask if in the room there's anybody that speaks mainly Spanish or has family or friends that do. And if you could please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. I'll do the question in Spanish. hay personas en la habitación hoy que hablan principalmente español o que tienen familiares o amigos que principalmente hablan español. Si pueden por favor levantar la mano. Well, you don't have to raise it again if you already did. Well, the reason we ask is because today we were providing Spanish interpretation, and we will be also providing it at our next meeting on the 21st. So we just wanted to encourage that if you do have friends or relatives that didn't show up today because of a language barrier, we do want to encourage that you please share this information with them and encourage them to attend. We will continue to have this information interpreted, and we also have at the table in the back all of our materials in Spanish as well, which you can grab today and take to them. So I just wanted to plug that in, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Victoria. Oh yes, Carolyn, hold on. We're going to go to this gentleman right here. He's been wanting to talk for a while.
Okay, I'm Don Nichols. I grew up in Banana Bend, swimming and skiing and everything else all my life, and that's just where I grew up. But this is too much information, and anybody that's getting this, God, this is too much. Well, look on the back of this sheet right here, where all these little things are, and I want to point out one thing that I want you guys to show. Leukemia, about halfway down the left, is leukemia. And one side it says 304, and the other side it says 97.3. Well, just round it off, 300 and 100, and show them that. You don't have to show them all this whole page. That they get lost in it, and they don't know what you're talking about when you're saying 300 and 100. But that's a large, significant, statistically increase there, and you can get their attention, when you do that. And that's my only comment right there. So don't let it go to Banana Bend.
Yep, spent a lot of time there. Thank you. My background is technical. My brain is very technical. And so I appreciate that. I struggled with what to include in the presentation and what not to. I definitely did go more technical in the briefing with the elected officials' offices. But I wanted to bring everything that I thought the community would grasp at least parts of. And I really appreciate thank you, I appreciate you sharing that with us and that reminder. And wow, how startling is that, huh? They expected to see 97.3 and they saw 304 cases of leukemia.
And that's all you have to show. You don't have to show any of the rest of that stuff on that page. Right there, we've got a cancer cluster right here.
Yeah.
It's in leukemia, and it's right here in our area. And you don't have to show anything else.
That's
They
not
can
true.
get it if they need to, ask you for more information, but no, this is it.
Noted. Yeah, thank you. Carolyn.
Okay, I just want to say, in response to several comments and things from here, most of us, we live in an unincorporated area, which means we do not have specific representation, a specific voice for us. We have commissioners, we have representatives, but they are for a vast area. And if there is an area that has a city board, council, that they have a mayor, they have that. The other representatives are more likely to listen to them than me or you. So what we have to do is to work together. We can't just me call, you call, they have to know that we are a joined group and that we join with other groups. Like, I started I started coming to Thea's, to the San Jacinto River Coalition, because I lived in Channelview and I found out there was a Superfund site. And there was other things going on, but I thought it was important to come back. Well, then I find out that the Superfund site is actually technically in Channelview. So it's like, first question is, why am I going to Highlands to get information that's occurring in Channelview? Not that it's not occurring everywhere else, but there. So that was a question. Well, I did verbalize that, and it kind of got foot in mouth. Well, one on you. But the thing is we live in a culture and we're fighting against a couple of things. And the thing is that for years and years and years, individually, we have stood up and said something. And nothing happened. So after a while of getting slapped, you shut up. So then the other thing is that many of us either work in the places that are causing that, our family works in it, our family owns it, they're our neighbor, or whatever, so then you're further intimidated to say anything. And because we don't have a central network, there's very little information sharing going on. And there's very little knowledge on how to get the information that you do have somewhere. So we have to work together to do that. And like Jackie sent out postcards. And I saw like one person raise their hand, just a few people raise their hands on it. The thing is when you receive some information, you need to share it with everybody, with your neighbor. However you share it, next door, Facebook, hi, how are you doing? Did you know? You know, that kind of...
I found it on TikTok.
Yeah.
Huge. It just popped up one night, 12 o'clock.
Yeah, and that's, but you have to share that information because as one voice,
And I haven't.
we can get more done, as one large voice.
Exactly.
We can get more done than as one. The other thing is when you contact these other agencies and stuff, I have found it is best to do it in writing because it's documented. And that's the other thing you got to do, is if you see something that's happening, you need to document it because otherwise it never happened. If there's somebody's doing some dumping or something, take a picture, video. If they're flaring off and you can see a lot of fumes you can't see, but if you can see, take a picture. You've got it documented because no one, and it gives us a better foot to stand on and we can work together that way. And through doing that, we started out, we worked with Jackie and we started our group in Channelview. Then Jackie and them brought their people over. We networked together. So we got a larger voice. Well, somewhere through all the networking and stuff, Public Health Watch and other organizations heard about what was going on here. Had we not been working together and networking and being noisy and a pain in the butt, they would have never heard about us. We're swept under the rug, we're ignored. So we have to work together and have a larger voice. And as long as it stays in Channelview, stays in Highlands, stays in Baytown, or whatever community it is, we will never get anything done. We have to work together and we have to be noisy about it. So that's, and we have to share information. Most importantly, we have to share information and we have to document what is happening in our neighborhood. So,
When you
thank you, Carol.
it by including that, they don't care anymore.
Well,
It's
yes,
diluted then.
but when we work together and we keep, like Jackie's going to keep going at them to get it narrowed down, their first attempt, and you see this in many examples, is to ignore the question. Ignore that that there's a problem. You see an explosion and the first thing you hear on TV, as smoke is running down and you're coughing and all this stuff, oh, there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing in the air. If you go back in reports, you will see that they were picking up this chemical and that chemical and all of this. People were going to the hospital.
Has a limit that you are allowed to discharge into the atmosphere.
Yes.
There's a certain parts per billion that these refineries and plants are allowed to emit.
But if you're documenting what is happening, the companies may be saying one thing, and what is reality is a whole different story. Same thing with the waste pits. For years, they were reporting things that were happening at the waste pits to Jackie. Jackie would call them, and the responsible parties, McGinnis, Waste Management, would say, oh no, that's not happening. Even the EPA would not. We'd go out and take pictures and document it that it was happening. Then Jackie would go back to them and say, hey. So then they had to take action. Same thing on everything around here. And air monitoring, when they say that only so much is being released, if we have our own air monitors and we're doing our own testing and stuff, we have a foot to stand on.
That's true too, but then again about the FOIA request. Every time there is a release from any plant around here, from anywhere, from an accident, from an on purpose, from anything, there is supposed to be documentation through the EPA and the state of Texas that tells you what was released and how much was released into the atmosphere.
It's not shared, but if you do a FOIA,
that's why I said FOIA.
yeah, if you do a FOIA and you ask for it, they will give you a hard time. Believe me, I know. They'll give you a hard time about doing it, but you just keep at them, and the information's there. That's why I say they tell you one thing, but then if you look behind the scenes, you will find something else. But if you're also documenting it, it makes it harder for them to deny it.
Yeah, Carolyn, you have some really great points there. Thank you. I have two other questions. We do have to be out of here at 8, so I'm sorry. I'm going to keep moving, but while Andy's walking back, I do want to say documentation, noting things is very important. And I saw some Highlands folks with Carolyn saying, but it's in Channelview. We all share the river. It floods all of our communities. So, the EPA was here. That's how we heard about it. But I want to thank the people from Channelview who crossed the river. Thank you if you're from other communities that came here, because we do have people that literally told us when my team was making calls about this meeting that people were saying, no, come to our community, we're not going there. So this is all of our river. We all need to be involved, so thank you all. And yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Kristen Buster, and we just moved here like a year ago, and we live right on the river. So there was a question asked earlier if people are getting information that the river's contaminated. No. If I would have known that, we probably would have not have moved onto the river. This is a question that is not necessarily geared towards cancer or that, but it is a pollution issue for people, especially that are right on the river. I was wondering if you know, or if anybody knows, if there are any laws for the barge traffic that goes up and down the river, because some things that are happening is they are going way too fast, sometimes they're going past each other. One's going up, one's going down. I watch them from my living room, and like 10 o'clock at night this is happening. Also, because they're going really fast, they're actually eating away at my yard, which is an issue. I don't have a bulkhead currently. My neighbor's not going to put a bulkhead in. They are super expensive, and we're talking $30,000 to put in a bulkhead, which I can't afford right now at this moment. So that's kind of my first question. And the other question I have is this map that you put out, that you gave us. First of all, this is horrifying on the back. Second of all, like if these areas are, this concerning about fishing. Do not eat, do not eat, do not eat, children and women, and then the toxic, some of them men can't eat. But with these numbers of leukemia and the cancer in the area, why are we just not saying do not eat? Do not eat these fish. Don't go fishing. Don't fish, period. I see people all the time fishing, and I have seen signs that say, don't eat this but more than once a month. But are the signs in Spanish? Are they being enforced? I mean, I saw one in Spanish, but I'm just saying, are people really not eating it once a month? I mean, do they know? Do they know this? I don't know. Anyway, that was my other concern.
I appreciate your concerns and your enthusiasm, and I agree with your concerns, and there's not enough signage and what is in place in terms of, if we could kind of quiet the conversations that are going on right now inside the meeting, please, so that folks who want to listen still can. The signs and the advisory is not enforced, so it's not enforceable. And the state of Texas is the one with the ability to make it a ban. So I encourage you to contact your state representative and ask, bug them, and others in here. Let your state representative know that this should be a ban. Over 97% of the fish tested in local waterways has had unsafe levels of contaminants in it. I agree as well. The once a month, or that men can eat more, their reasoning for that is because their sperm turns over quicker. So that's exactly, because your concern, the concern is the reproduction, right? So that's why they say it's okay for, literally, why the state health department told me it's safe for men versus women. But the man himself could still get cancer or have an adverse effect. So I don't agree with it. I agree that more should be done. It should be stronger. It should be enforceable. It's not safe, and we know it. We all wore seatbelts on the way here, didn't we? I hope. We've learned. And there was something else that you said in the beginning, the barges. Yes, thank you. And we do have one more hand that was raised as well I want to get to. The barges has been a massive Mount Everest battle. The privatization, essentially, as Carolyn says, of the San Jacinto River is absolutely absurd. And I appreciate you sharing your experience because we need more of that. And our elected officials, again, need to be hearing that. And Interstate 10 being replaced, and bigger barges, and more barges being able to go under it, is only going to make that worse. But the agencies north of Interstate 10, the government agencies, point their finger at one another in terms of responsibility. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
So we do have monthly meetings here, and if you put your email on there, they will reach out to you. If your phone number's on there, they will call you. And usually at those meetings, we do have a lot of letters and things to sign that there was thousands that we had sent to Washington. She personally hand-delivered them to the EPA in Washington, which made a huge impact. So your letters and the things that we ask you to sign are very important. The statement that I want to make is, it doesn't matter if you've lived here a year or a lifetime. The first year that my family and I moved into our ranch, my dream home, my family started experiencing issues. My animals started experiencing issues. 5 years in, boy, we were really sick. Seizures, cancer, tumors. The list didn't end. So it doesn't matter if it's a year or a lifetime. Some people have a higher exposure rate, so you can take a lot more than maybe your husband or your daughter. For instance, I don't have the issues that most of the people in my family do. There's no explanation for that. I was at my ranch 24/7, drinking the water, being in the soil, planting my plants, eating my chicken eggs. So it doesn't really matter the length of time. It's just your personal body, how much can it take? And I started going door to door. I moved here in '01, started going door to door after Ike hit, because I found that that's when we got the sickest, when the storm came and just threw all of that on us. So we started getting sick. I started going door to door, and I can tell you in all honesty, almost every door I hit, someone in that household had cancer. I didn't stop hitting doors for years. I would go out 3 and 4 days a week and just knock my neighbors' doors. And most of them had a horrifying story to tell me. That's when I joined the San Jacinto River Coalition with Sarah and Jeanette. It was just a small group of us ladies trying to make a difference. When I noticed my daughter was becoming educated in the environment, partially because of where we lived, and Dr. Gossett, we knew about her and one of her colleagues, and they started helping us, and it has started this entire movement. But we do get things done. And if you come to the monthly meetings, I promise you, the letters and the things, the petitions that we have you sign, get to where they're supposed to be going. And also, we are a nonprofit. There is a donation box. We work off of donations, and grants. That's the way we are able to do what we do. So please, if you have an extra dollar or you feel like getting online and donating, that would really be a big help. But she's been doing it for 10 years. She is a geologist in her background, so we know what we're doing, but it's real, and people come and move. And if you've lived here and you hadn't heard what we're talking about, and you maybe move away and you get cancer, then you don't know. Maybe I got it there, but you have no idea because you moved away and you weren't thinking about where you lived prior. So you always have to be mindful of where you're living and what's around where you live.
Well, I'm almost 40 and I'm honored to be able to say thank you, Mom. All right, thank you all so much for being here. I'll echo, your voice matters, so please use it. We'll follow up with you if you signed in. Please do so if you haven't. We'll send you some additional info. Thank you.